Remove the diffuser bands. She's alive! Alive!
Horror Hounds, welcome to episode 15 of the Black Sunday Tapes Classic Horror. We are back with another Universal Monster film, possibly the greatest sequel ever made. I certainly believe it's the greatest sequel ever made. I've seen this film countless times. I'm of course talking about 1935's The Bride of Frankenstein. Now, as I said, I have seen this film countless times. However, I believe for my co-host, this was the first time you had watched it, Michael, correct?
100%, yeah. It was. I was pleased in a fashion that we're gonna get into. I truly feel that almost every individual sequence of the film we could probably stretch into an entire episode.
Yeah.
But in an effort not to do that, we're just gonna glance on a few things and go deep on a couple others.
Of course.
It's audacity and scale. The last act of the film crescendos in such a fashion that if you contextualize when it came out is as every bit grand as like Avengers Endgame or something. Like it's just huge.
Yeah, and it still stands up today, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And you know some of the effects, like if you showed a 19-year-old who doesn't know how to use a rotary phone the effects, they'd be like, these are the worst things I've ever seen. But if you're able to appreciate, whoa, when did they do this? Whoa, like the again, we'll get into it a little later, but the tinies of it all, and then I don't know, man, just like the way that even the physical makeup on Karloff was refined, which at first threw me, but I really came to appreciate its profile, both side and rear, at times, and I went, okay, all right, I kind of get it now. But anyway.
I think you've kind of just touched on a good place to start, actually, with
okay, let's do that. Yeah,
the Karloff makeup, actually, because this was, and also the special effects of this film. We're just coming off the back of The Invisible Man, right? So we're coming off the back of one James Whale film that really, really pushed special effects to the point where, when I first watched it, I was like, how the hell they did it. I know you were the same. I know a couple of our listeners out there reached out to us and said they were really interested to find out how they done them effects. What's interesting about this is the same effects team come over from The Invisible Man and done some of the effects in this, like with the little people in the jars and stuff like that, which, I won't touch on it too much, but it was basically achieved the same way The Invisible Man stuff was achieved, filming on black velvet and then kind of double exposure and shooting, matching everything up, which is incredible for, easy to do now, right? But back in the day, if you
hell, you can do it with the phone in your pocket right now, but
right, and also
in
you've got to remember,
1930, what did you say, 5? Like,
yeah,
come
1935. Yeah, I mean, if you remember, back then there was no watching stuff back until it was processed, so they had no idea them effects had worked until they watched back, the processed film, as it were. The processed.
Okay, no, serious question. Do you have any idea how much they would have actually had? Like they were like, we're gonna film 30 seconds, we're gonna film a minute, we're gonna film 10 seconds, and to test to see if it's gonna work.
Yeah, so I get exactly what you're saying. You're coming.
Please help me with it then.
So you're coming from the point of view of, because you can't watch it as it's happening like you would now on a digital monitor, how do you know if the effect has worked, right? And the truth is, you wouldn't.
Or like how much effort would they put forth for an initial return?
So everything would have been tested. Everything would have been tested, but if that comes out on a final product, not is a completely different story. So they would have tested the effect. They would have shown James Whale and Universal that they could do what, because that was that part of the. I don't believe that's part of the novel at all, where actually a lot of this film leans.
Because you said
heavily on
that,
the
one of
novel,
the
right?
things that bugged me every time I watched it was up front. There's a credit is as suggested by the original novel. I'm like, I've read
Yes.
the original novel. I love the
Yes.
original novel. This is not suggested by the original novel.
No, no. But it's the reason why. Do you know what? Hold on. We'll come back to that because that opening with Mary Shelley,
Mm-hmm.
there is an important reason for that. Which I'll
Okay.
get to. But the effects, yeah, basically you would not know those effects had worked until we had processed the whole thing. So you could test it to show that it's possible, to show that you could shoot on black velvet and then re-expose that film and match it all up, and the effect would be possible. But in terms of the film, the scene you see in the film, they would have to have shot all of that, double exposed it, made sure it played, and then you don't know until you've processed it. You might have to go back in and refilm it. But yeah, so until you've shot it, really, sent it to the lab, processed it all, you wouldn't know. You might have to pick it up the next day and redo it. But to go back to the opening scene, so that is not a point of contention, but something that people bring up because it is a little bit strange because the first film does stray quite heavily from the novel, and then this second one picks up that idea of Mary Shelley kind of explaining a little bit about the novel.
I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and
I
especially
enjoyed that.
because Mary Shelley and the bride are both played by Elsa Lanchester.
Which I did not pick up until round 2.
Right. Okay. Okay. Interesting. So the whole point of that is that they're both played by Elsa Lanchester, and what it's to show is that Mary Shelley was very much perceived as a pretty person, as the quote is. She was perceived as a pretty person, and what
Okay.
James Wow wanted to show was that pretty people can come up with fiendish ideas, and that the fiendish ideas we come up with, the monsters we come up with, are influenced by the real people. So that's why he used the same actress, of which he had to, that took some convincing, apparently. Universal weren't down for the same actress to be playing both roles, but,
Really?
yeah, but he, like I touched on in the Invisible Man episode, he did not want to make this film. They, as soon as
You did
it
say
is,
that.
yeah,
Which is interesting because it's
which is
really
crazy,
good.
right?
It's
Right,
really good.
which is crazy. So it is said that as soon as Frankenstein had its preview screenings, Universal wanted a sequel. The buzz was that high. They wanted a sequel. James Whale refused to do the sequel, and Cole Lumley Jr. only wanted James Whale to do his film. He didn't want any other director. He only wanted James Whale. They gave James Whale The Invisible Man. He got to make The Invisible Man. He got to make a couple of other films as well. And it was basically in giving James Whale the freedom to do this. This allowed him to. This then convinced him, to then go on and make The Bride of Frankenstein. But also in making The Bride of Frankenstein, they gave him complete control. It is said that at this time, no director had this level of control over a motion picture than James Whale had over Bride of Frankenstein, especially
Right on.
of this budget and of this scale. So there were so many things that he got to do that he didn't get to do in the previous one. The sets were so much bigger, the camera movements were
Most
so much.
definitely.
Yes, the camera movements were a lot more grand.
Well,
He got to,
specifically just because you said the sets real quick,
yeah,
like one of the
yeah,
things that I noticed immediately was the when they get back to Frankenstein's laboratory or whatever you want to call it.
yes,
He that it was where in the first one there was like a little bit of a staircase and then like a background painting to give the illusion of more. It was like nope, it was a giant staircase.
oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, they got to go, even just like sets that you see once, like when Colin Clive's Dr. Frankenstein is being taken back home, and
Mhm.
they put him on the table. Just the grand.
Okay, you just touched upon that. I need to get to a place in life where I have enough expendable fucking income to where my estate will have that room somewhere on it.
It's
Like
incredible, isn't it?
the pointed curvature, like the arches that are curved. I loved it so much. I ran it back probably 6 or 7 times on the first viewing,
Okay.
and then every subsequent viewing I just loved it. I'm weird like that. my God, it was just I needed that architecture, and then you
Yeah,
get
man.
more, you get a little more of it later, and I was like, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Sorry.
It's incredible. Dude, it's incredible. It's the scope that he gets to play with on this film. But like I said, that's because Cole Lumley Jr. wanted him. He only wanted James Whale, and then because the success of The Invisible Man, that really hit home with him. He wasn't doing this film without James Whale. He had to get James Whale on board. So yeah, James Whale had some demands, man. One of them was them grand sets. One of them was bringing Colin Clive back to play Frankenstein because Colin Clive's alcohol intake had, skyrocketed since the first film, which, he was an alcoholic on the first film, but during this one even more so. But
Did you say alcoholic?
yeah, alcoholic, yeah. But
Oh,
James Whale still managed to, get a great performance out of him, and that even added to it. And then, in all these casting decisions, he was able to bring in, there was a few actresses up for the role of the bride and Mary Shelley, but he was very adamant it would be one actress that would play both roles, and eventually brought in Elsa Lanchester to play those roles, which, yeah, I really like the opening. I sometimes forget about it,
I was
and then
thrown by it, but I
yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah, you definitely get thrown by it. But I mean, even that, right? Like, even the grand set of that, the grand set of
Oh my
what
God,
could be just a
scale. Like that was
throwaway opening. Yeah,
like my first real note was, oh, there's the whale scale.
there you go. There you go. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, he was famous for that, and I think this film shows it, especially within his horror films. This film shows it more than any other film. It really, really does. So let's bring it back around a little. Let's bring it around to the cast. So you touched on the Karloff makeup, which we're certainly going to get into, but let's start with Karloff's performance within itself, because obviously the big difference in the performance here is the monster speaks.
Oh my
So
God. All right, you said it. Okay,
go on.
so please, like, oh Jesus, if this puts me into some sort of weird minority, I apologize.
Okay.
But I was really thrown. Not
Okay.
when not when he first started to speak, because at first I was like, okay, all right, words, little words here, there. But to the extent to which he then spoke later on really kind of irked me on first view.
Okay. That's
It
interesting.
just I don't know, man. It was like again, it's 1935, so we'll forgive like this. But I was just like, he just goes from like literally a yesterday he was like fire bad, and
Yeah.
then and now he's having almost conversations. I was like, just that quick? Hmm? Hmm?
So strangely enough, it's widely regarded that a lot of people like that the character evolves this way and
Okay.
that he speaks. And actually, I believe some critics during the day really praised it for adding emotion and stuff like that. However, the one person that hated the fact that the monster spoke was Boris Karloff himself. He, yeah, he
Okay.
completely, he really didn't want it to happen, man. He really, really kicked off about it and really didn't think it would do anything. However, he did come round to it a little bit later on in life. His daughter, in some interviews, you'll see with her, she does openly admit she believes her father was wrong, and that the performance definitely benefits from the speech, especially with the. I personally like it because it really comes into its own within the scene with the hermit, which is my favorite scene in the whole film, to
Oh,
be honest.
100%. Okay, so
Yeah,
I don't want to railroad you real quick, but like I'm not saying that like overall I hated it. I just thought it went maybe a little too far because the exact scene that you're talking about, I love that those two characters are coming from such an emotionally similar and pure core,
yeah, yeah,
and their in quote flaw is the thing that allows them to have their relationship. And like I can't tell you how genuinely I smile and laugh every time I watch the smoke.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I mean that was I loved it, right?
yeah.
But I don't know, like a little later where it's almost literally full conversation, I was like too much. I'm not
I
I'm not
definitely
saying
see what you're saying.
like I hated that that he spoke at all. I just thought it went a little far.
I definitely see what you're saying. I definitely see what you're saying.
Okay.
It's quite an interesting debate because in the novel, he's fully he fully speaks, right? There is no, within the novel, the monster completely speaks. He has speech from the very start, so it's definitely something they wanted to bring into this. But with that said, it's something that James Wow put a lot of effort into. He actually works with some people at Universal to come up with a very, very strict dictionary of words that the monster could say.
Okay.
There was about 30 words, I believe, that they there's actually a really weird bit of trivia, and I'll say it to you, and I'll see if you pick up on why this bit of trivia sounds really weird. So the words that James Well and Universal picked, they picked about 30 words of which they put into a dictionary. And the way they got these words is they got them from doing a focus group, and I quote, with 10-year-olds that worked at the studio at the time.
That worked at the studio at the time.
Right. Right. I'm so glad you burst out laughing like that, because I've seen this bit of trivia come up a few times now, and it always amazes me of why the fuck were there 10-year-olds working at Universal? Why? Why are we glossing over that? Forget about the fucking speech. I want to know why there were 10-year-olds working at Universal.
I mean, that's horrible, but
It's crazy, man. I've seen it. I believe it's on the IMDb trivia. I've seen it come up in documentaries. I've seen many people say it, and it's always worded that way. 10-year-olds that were working at Universal at the time. Why did Universal have 10-year-olds working for them? So strange, man.
like it's 35, right? So
Yeah.
like nobody gave a
Nobody
flying
gave.
anything
Nobody
like
gave a shit.
about rights.
Nobody gave a shit. So let's actually, before we get off of Karloff and the monster, there's a couple of points I think we should just touch on while we're here. So within the film, he is credited still as the monster. However, this is where the debate between is he called the monster, is he called Frankenstein, really comes into its own. So
Well,
in my
because the glorious crazy nonsense that is Pretorius, I hope I'm saying that right because I heard it weird every time.
yeah.
It says the Bride of Frankenstein, just evoking the title, and you're like, but he's not Frankenstein.
Well, is he not? See, this is the so some people will tell you he's not. However, and I'm of this mindset, I believe it is officially canon that he is called Frankenstein. Purely because of this. So actually
I would argue you in the original, but here I agree.
Yeah, definitely here. I mean, there's quite a few reasons why you could argue he's called Frankenstein. Even in the original novel, though he's never referred to as Frankenstein, there is and I haven't read it for years, so I'm going to completely misquote this.
Same, but I do love it. I love it so dearly.
There's something that's referred to as the creation of Frankenstein, as in Dr. Frankenstein. He is somewhat a son to him. And in doing it, you would inherit his name, right? You would take his name.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right. So there's that argument, but within this film, I think it's completely undeniable. I mean, if the some people would argue the title actually refers to the Doctor's bride. However, I don't think that's true at all. All of Universal's marketing and everything is completely on the monster and his bride. So I think the fact that it's titled Bride of Frankenstein gives that away. But actually, from the very opening scene of the film, when I can't remember what gentleman it is, but one of the gentlemen in the very opening of the scene refers to the monster as Frankenstein when approaching Mary Shelley, played by Elsa Lanchester, and
just
she
because
does
I
not
was
correct.
so put off by how overly theatrical he was. I can't call myself the best
But
at anything. I'm sorry.
she
Anyway.
doesn't put him right or anything. So within the film, within the lore of this film, he is called Frankenstein. And then there are other references throughout the film of which he is called Frankenstein and referred to as Frankenstein. So I think within this film, that debate is completely settled for me. You can call the monster Frankenstein. That is absolutely fine. But look, if you want to call it the monster as well, that's fine. We're not gatekeeping here. Call it whatever the bloody hell you want, in all honesty.
if I was trying, if I came off elitist, that wasn't the intent. I was
No,
just like, I
definitely not.
get both
Definitely
sides of
not.
that argument.
Yeah, yeah. No, I do. I get both sides of that argument. It's quite strange. It's quite a strange argument when people get like so um so wrapped up with it. It's crazy how people can get wrapped up with it. But that was just a side note, really. The note I really want to get onto, you touched on it from the very start. I adore what Jack Pierce done with the makeup in this film. I love that he really evolved, not only evolved the makeup from the first film when you first see the monster, but actually the makeup evolved throughout the film as if the monster is healing. It's incredible, man. The fact that
I didn't actually notice that.
yeah, it's very subtle. It's very subtle, but the monster does heal a little bit as if he can heal a little bit faster than
I mean, I noticed it
most
between
humans.
movie 1, movie 2, but I didn't notice it like within the film. You're saying that's kind
Yeah,
of cool.
within the film.
Right on.
Yeah, within the film, and I mean, just from the get go, right? Like we've got the singed hair, we've got the scars, the burn scars on the arms. There's a burn scar on the face.
Yeah.
How did you take it, man? How did you take to the slightly adjusted look?
Except, like at first, I was really kind of what? Because it was, I don't know, it was.
Did you not get what they were trying to do with it?
At first, I was like, it's way more subtle, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's way more subtle. You know, I settled into it, but it was just, I was just kind of expecting the same, and when immediately they're like, this is picking up moments from the end of the first film, and so when he pops up out of that water, which can we touch for a minute on the grandeur of that particular set? Like, A, why is there an underground owl? I love the
Oh
owl,
yeah,
but why is
yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
underground?
Yeah.
And then also, why is there just a giant watery, awesome crypt? I don't even
Do
know
you
what to
know?
call that thing. Like, what
Do
is
you know
that doing
Boris?
underneath that windmill?
So you're
Like,
gonna love this. Boris Karloff broke his hip on that set.
what? No, really?
Yeah,
What?
because
How?
he slipped and fell into the water. He slipped and fell into the water. He broke his hip.
Like from the way up there? Like
Yeah, and then and for the
from the
rest of the
top to
film,
the bottom?
yeah, for the
Jesus,
rest of the film, he had he had a broken hip and
that's
had to
awful.
manage it all broken hip. Yeah,
Oh,
crazy, right?
God damn, that's awful.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, insane. And also, I can't really remember how it happened, but I believe during the making of this film, Colin Clive also broke his leg.
No shit.
Yeah, man, it was like it
There
was a
you
bit of
go.
a fucking cursed set, to be fair.
They,
Incredible.
they need to do this movie for the next season of cursed films.
Oh man, imagine that would be cool, wouldn't it? That would be cool. Yeah. So, getting back to the makeup, I believe you said it's me off air. Actually, you said about the one of the things that threw you with the makeup was that the face wasn't as sunken as
Yeah, no, like
right. Yeah.
that's like that was one of the things that I found so, and not just me, everybody finds classic about the image of the close up of his face is like those sunken cheeks
Yeah.
somehow sell the makeup just a layer that takes it from great makeup to like 100% believable, even though you know it's not a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when it comes back, I'm like, whoa, hold on a minute, his cheeks are very full here.
So
It
there's two
totally threw
reasons for
me.
that. So there's two reasons for that. So as we touched on in the first one, Boris Karloff had a dental plate on the side of his face, which he was able to remove for the first film. The reason he was able to remove that is because essentially the monster had no speech, and without the dental plate, he couldn't speak properly.
Oh,
So because he had words, he
oh,
couldn't take it out. But actually, that's probably the more famous story. But actually, there's a completely other reason as well. When Boris Karloff made the original Frankenstein, he was a struggling, starving actor.
100%.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He was really, really struggling. Now, Karloff was coming off the back of Frankenstein. He was coming off the back of a couple of films, of which he become a huge star. I mean, as you see right up in the top of this film, he's just Universal advertising him as Karloff. Just
Mm,
his surname. That's how famous he was. So come the Bride of Frankenstein, he could afford food basically, and he
right.
was living very well. So though he was still a slender gentleman, he was no longer a starving, very very skinny gentleman. So in terms of the sunken look of Frankenstein, yes, it is definitely missing
It
that
was
in
no
the sequel.
Ardith Bay.
Right. But it couldn't have been because, Karloff needed to, he was only going to go up. He was only going to be able to afford food, right? And
Right.
Karloff plays Frankenstein one more time after this in the
Really?
next film, called Son of Frankenstein. Last time he made it was without James Whale. He didn't really want to do it anyway. He did do it, however, he didn't
Total
return
sidebar.
after that.
He does come back for one of the Abbott Costellos, no?
Not as Frankenstein.
No?
No, he comes back as another character, but not as Frankenstein. Yeah,
All
he
right,
comes
well,
back as we
We'll
won't we
bonus
won't
episode that.
we won't talk about
I
the
do love
bonus
me some
episode.
Abbott Costello.
Yeah,
And
but
I've never seen that film.
he doesn't come back as Frankenstein.
So he's in
There's
the film, but not Frankenstein. All right.
yes, and there's another famous actor that plays Frankenstein in that film, but we'll
Really?
get to
All right.
yes, we'll
At
get
that
to
time. All right.
we'll
Teaser.
get to that.
Teaser.
We'll get to that. It's a teaser, but yeah, dude, that's why the makeup does look slightly different. So
That being said, I totally 100% dug the profile, both side and
yes,
rear,
yes,
of the makeup. The new
it's incredible, isn't it?
subtly different makeup was just like where again I appreciate the close up of the sunken cheeks. The profile of this is just next level. Like so like 100 a shadow, just a
Yeah,
shadow puppet of
yeah.
it would be perfect.
Well, it's that big imposing figure, right? Which, again, I won't completely spoil, but Jack Pierce really plays on that in the next film, in Son of Frankenstein. He makes the silhouette even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wait,
because
bigger.
Because Boris Karloff's filling out a little bit when you come to Son of
Oh,
Frankenstein,
okay.
the sunken looks completely gone. But the idea of the monster filling out, the idea of the monster becoming a little bit bigger, a little bit bulkier. They really, really play that up in the next one, which is quite interesting because what I like about that is there's this evolution not only of the character from Karloff's point of view, but the evolution of the makeup on Jack Pierce's point of view on the Karloff version. Yeah, really, really like that. It gets a little bit worse after that, but that's neither here nor there for that podcast. So, on that note, let's jump into the second most famous makeup, the most famous female monster of all time. Just like the Karloff makeup, no secret. I absolutely adore this. Again, giant tattoo of this on my arm. Elsa Lanchester as the monster's mate, as she's officially credited, but the bride, as we all know her of. What did you think of that makeup? Because that is very, very different.
It is, but I also for the same reasons that you kind of love Frankenstein initially, you love the bride because you understand that they couldn't grow. You understand they couldn't go grotesque,
Yeah,
because of the times, and also you wouldn't really want to, and they have to sell, blah 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 blah. But the fact that they took a very attractive, a very attractive woman and silhouette and dress, but also took it into a macabre place without going
yes,
weird and
yeah,
and proportionally bizarre. Like the proportion that's weird is the hair and nothing else, whereas the proportion that's weird on Karloff is the forehead.
yes,
That made
yes,
sense, right?
yeah. You're right. They don't go as grotesque on this, and that was definitely by design. Universal didn't want to do that. Universal did not want an ugly female monster, as it is said. I think if they did go that way, there's no way this would be as iconic.
True.
There is definitely
Well, I
something to
agree.
be said.
I'm not gonna say true, but I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, there's definitely something to be said within that. And also, what's quite fascinating about that is when you really dig into that. Look, that was decided by men at Universal. However, it wasn't just men that didn't want to see a grotesque female monster on screen. It was women of the time as well. Women really, really brought into this. Women really liked the idea of the representation of the bride, and they wouldn't have been as sold on it at the time if she was a lot more grotesque. I feel like what they do with it, like you said, it's a very macabre look. You can definitely tell that she's a monster. She definitely fits in with the monsters.
Yeah.
But they also do play with Elsa Lanchester's beauty, as
Well,
was
yeah.
to be expected back in the day. But actually, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing in this case, because
Exploitative.
back then you couldn't exploit. Back then, the exploitation of film didn't come around until the 60s and 70s. You literally couldn't do it. Actually, so much so that opening scene was heavily cut. The opening scene of her as Mary Shelley was heavily cut, and the reason it was heavily cut is because the Hays Code at the time asked Universal and James Whale to make several cuts that were of a medium shot or close up of Elsa Lanchester as Mary Shelley, because they deemed her dress too low, and they dreamed that the dress showed off too much of her chest, which is crazy when you look at it today, right? Because it shows nothing in today's light, but back then couldn't show that at all. Couldn't have that. This film, we'll get into it a little
Today
bit
you
more,
could
but
have
this
that
film
on
was
any television show, on
yeah,
any G-rated or general audience or whatever your local. I don't know the world's rating system, but anyway, it's nothing. And
yeah,
now,
it's crazy,
and
right?
back then it was
Yeah.
just a
But
total.
back then you couldn't. Yeah, they completely had. They had a lot of this film cut, which we'll get into. But yeah, the opening scene. That's why it was cut. It was very heavily cut because of the dress she was wearing, and they deemed it way too sexual. But in terms of the bride, the makeup, I really want to touch on the makeup. I think we're going to get into Elsa Lanchester's performance because she's in it for a heartbeat, man. She is not in it at all. However, she has become.
Kind of spoilers. I mean, actually, hella spoilers. Like, I was annoyed that only because you said that right now. I was doing a little research for the initial film and had managed to avoid spoilers this far in my life for anything really
Oh yeah,
involving
yeah,
Bride of Frankenstein, and had some shit spoiled for me, which I really didn't appreciate because it was right before we were about to watch it.
that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, it's called The Bride of Frankenstein. She's in it for nothing. She's the Colonel Kurtz. Oh God, is it Kurtz?
Yeah, Kurtz. Yeah,
She's the Colonel Kurtz of
yeah,
this
she
film.
is. But again, I'm going to put my hand up and say I don't think that's a bad thing in this case because
No, not at all.
they
Not at all.
save the reveal for when they need to have the reveal. Now, I do think that this is ripe for a reboot or a remake that really, really focuses on the bride a lot more. However, I feel like
They've
for the
tried to do
film,
it twice in the last like 5 years.
yeah, I know, yeah, but the film we have, I don't think that's a mistake because she is the holy grail. She is what you're building to, and
Yeah.
I feel like you have to hold that. You have to hold that fucking card, man, until you are ready to play it. And when James Whale plays it, he fucking plays it right, and it hits. It
Oh, it's
fucking
the ears in
hits
the hole
when
for sure.
yeah, man. And it's and I think her performance is great. We're gonna get in a performance in a minute, but for me with the makeup, I think it's great because it is macabre, the very pale face, the scar that just goes under the chin, which it is said that Jack Pierce took nearly as long on that one little scar as he took doing Karloff's whole makeup, of which Elsa Lanchester did not appreciate. Karloff loved Jack Pierce. Elsa Lanchester hated Jack Pierce. She
Okay.
yeah, there's some stories out there where she said that she did not get along with him at all. Jack Pierce, by this time had created the most famous monsters ever put to screen.
I'm sorry.
And
You can use this if you're not, but like I
oh
just can't even imagine really like somebody I don't get along with is touching my face for like 8 hours a day. Fuck
yeah,
off.
yeah, I know, I
Like
know.
no.
Yeah, she just she there's a famous quote where she said that he acted less like a man and more like a god because of the characters he had created.
Okay.
And yeah, she said that she had done films before. She wasn't a very successful actress before this. She had done stuff, but she wasn't hugely successful. But she had done stuff, and she said that normally you would turn up and the makeup artist would be somebody you would hardly even recognize until they started doing your makeup. She said, but she'd turn up in the morning and you'd know Jack Pierce turned up because he wasn't so much a makeup artist. He turned up like a surgeon in his white overcoat and his glasses and his gloves, which you've probably seen if you've listened to the other podcasts and see the images I put up of Jack Pierce. Yeah, he definitely had that look, but yeah, she didn't get along with him at all. But the birdcage hairstyle, which was a James Whale thing as well. We touched on before, a lot of these makeups, especially Frankenstein, it's debated who come up with it. It's actually very, very well known that with The Bride, it was very much a James Whale, Jack Pierce co-creation. James Whale had his he wanted the hair a certain way, he wanted the look a certain way, and Jack Pierce got to go in there and touch stuff up and really bring it to life. But yeah, man, I think it's absolutely incredible. And to swing it around to the performance, I think she does an incredible job. I think the film kicks off
100%.
with the Mary Shelley stuff. I think she's great as Mary Shelley. Shows a completely different style of acting. But I think when the bride comes to life, that, you know, the famous shots of her looking around the laboratory where she's
I
not really
love how
sure what's going on
girl-like
is
she
great.
is. Like that,
Yeah.
it was very striking to me.
Yeah.
Like,
What did you think of the hissing when she first sees the monster and she starts hissing at him as he's about to pull the lever?
My genuine first reaction was, she hisses like my cat.
Right.
That
So
was my reaction, to be honest with you.
So that is she actually says where that comes from. So she spent a lot of time in England, and she said that she used to go over to Regent's Park here in the UK and feed the swans. And she said that when you would feed them, they'd be perfectly fine, perfectly tame. But if you got too close to their young, the females would start hissing, and that's what she based it on. Yeah, she based it on swans hissing
It's awesome.
at you. So yeah, she thought because the bride at that point would be very animalistic, that she wanted to add stuff like that in there. Yeah, but that yeah, man, I think she's absolutely incredible. So we touched on Karloff. We touched a little bit on Colin Clive, who not too much to say about him in this film. He basically plays the same role as he did in the first one. Again, though, despite being a raging alcoholic at this point, I think he's great again. Elsa Lanchester, amazing. However, maybe the standout for this film that doesn't get touched on a lot, but you've brought him up a few times. Pretorius, played by
He's amazing.
Played by Ernest Fessinger. Amazing, right? Absolutely great. And
not like him more. I don't.
Something I do want to touch on. It's not fully confirmed, but something that has heavily been debated in the following years is one of the.
I think you're gonna go. You probably are. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go on. Where do you think we're going? No, go on. Where do you think we're going?
Because, all right.
Go on.
I was a few lines into him, and what solidified it for me was the scene where he first bombs in after the brilliant cape blowing in the wind, and he's trying to talk to our buddy Frank, and he's like, "It's a private matter," and the look on his face was like, "Leave us, woman." I was like, "Oh, this guy's a gay icon."
Yes.
And I didn't get to do almost any research, but in the little bit that I did, because I was so taken by his performance, I did read that it's heavily rumored as to whether or not he may have been bisexual, though he was married to a woman.
So it's widely considered that Ernest Fessinger, the actor, was gay.
Okay.
It's very common. I don't know if you know this actually, but it's very common knowledge that James Whale was openly gay at the time. And
long story short, didn't know that until kind of recently. Okay. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. So when he got to make this film, he put a lot of that in it. There is some suggestion that the monster himself is gay or bisexual or leans that way.
Well, since we're touching on that, let's be honest. Like that's a thing that's like an horror in general is the reason that people who identify as in quote other identify so much with horror is because the villains are always considered in quote other, even though they have their reasons for being whatever they are.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I should say before we go any further that this is all rumored. It's been speculated by scholars and people that research film. The most concrete we have to it is James Whale's official biographer. He said that is not the case, and James Whale didn't put that in the film. Okay. However, there has been suggestions of certain stuff that was in the screenplay that the Hays Code cut before they even shot the film. So for those that don't know, back in the day, you would have the censors look at your film twice. You would complete the screenplay, and before you even went to production, you would have to submit the screenplay to be approved before you could even start filming. Bride of Frankenstein from the outset had a shitload of stuff cut from the screenplay, which is amazing because actually in the film it turns out far worse than what it did in the screenplay. But yeah, and then when they actually made the film, the original cut of the film was over 90 minutes, and they had to cut about 15, 20 minutes out of the film
Yeah.
because of
Wait,
certain things.
so the way that contemporary Hollywood wanted fucking under 100, they wanted under 75 or something, because this was 75, right?
Well, it wasn't that they
Minutes,
wanted
75
that.
minutes is what
Yeah,
I
it
meant.
wasn't that they wanted that. It was just they demanded that so much be cut. So there was certain things. Like I said, the opening of the film was far longer, but they had to cut quite a few shots of Mary Shelley because they considered her dress too sexual and it revealed too much of her chest. There was deaths even deaths that happened off screen that were suggested. They believed that the suggestion was far too graphic, so they had to be cut.
Really?
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff like that. But then there was stuff in the screenplay as well, man. Like there was actually a lot of stuff in the screenplay that you got to remember that at the time, religion was everywhere, right? And it wasn't like today where it's openly debated. There is nothing wrong.
Not even a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, right. There is nothing wrong with today you saying I don't believe in God. Back then, you could not say that shit, right? You couldn't even touch on it. So much so you couldn't even suggest anything that went against God. So, for instance, in the screenplay, there's a line in the film where Pretorius, it's in the crypt when is it in the crypt? I can't remember when it is. There's a line in the film where Pretorius says about the bringing stuff to life and stuff like that. And there's a line where he says, and your Bible stories in the original
Yes.
screenplay.
Yes.
Yes. So in the original screenplay,
That's
that
when he's trying to
line.
sell
Oh, he says if
Frankenstein.
you
Yeah.
believe, he says if you believe
Oh,
in
if you
your
like,
Bible
if
stories.
you heard your Bible stories,
Yeah.
yeah.
In the screenplay, that was fairy tales. If you believe in your fairy tales. Funny thing was that once so then they rewrote it, right? They rewrote it to Bible stories. Back in the day, once you had submitted that screenplay and then it got approval, once you shot those words of which had been approved, they then couldn't be changed. The guy that was responsible for changing the line, having them change the line from fairy tales to Bible stories, said that once he saw the film and saw that the absolute contempt that Ernest Fessinger delivers the Bible storylines with, he just wished he left it the other way. He said it's far worse now
A little
with the
bit.
Bible stories. Yeah, the other one
But
was
that was genuinely just like the balls of that delivery of that being the
yeah,
thing that I
yeah,
was watching.
yeah.
Like I chef kissed at the
Yes, yes.
audacity of that. Like I loved it. I
And then
loved it.
the other one that they done, which again they couldn't change because they had already approved it, is there's a shot in the film where when the monster's rampaging through the graveyard and he pushes over a statue of a bishop.
Mm-hmm.
And in the original screenplay, what that was he approached a statue of a crucified Jesus Christ and didn't understand it was a statue. And he just thought it was someone that was being crucified the same way he had. So he pulls the statue of Jesus off the crucifix as if to save him. But they wanted it changed because they didn't want the monster to interact with
Oh
an
my God,
image
I
of
wish you
Jesus
could see
Christ.
my face right now. That would have been so amazing.
Right.
Like
So then they
I would have
changed.
spoken to me. This would have been my favorite. This would have been my favorite movies of all time
Yeah.
if that had
So
happened.
then
Oh my God, really?
they completely
That's wonderful.
changed it to where in the
Which is
screenplay they then
awful.
just
Why?
wrote that he pushes over a statue in the cemetery. Now in cemeteries at that time, the only statues you got were religious. So
Right.
the statue he ends up pushing over is a statue of a bishop, which is completely worse. Because this is now the idea of the monster, destroying religion, right? Where before it
Right.
was him saving, and now it's far worse. But they'd already approved it. There's nothing they could do
Well,
about it.
let's be honest here. It also, at the time in the picture, doubles down on a similar theme where earlier with the Dr. Pretorius making the tiny little people, the first person they create is queen, and then a queen needs a
Yeah,
king,
yeah,
and the next person they create is so disdainful that they deem him an archbishop. So they just decided king, queen, and then the next person that comes along is so disdainful of everything. They were like, you know what? That's a religious iconography person right there.
Yeah.
We need that person to be somehow religious. So they go Archbishop, and then later on you get the scene we were just discussing. And yeah, you can't argue that correlation is not causation or causation is not correlation, whichever way that goes. But you could argue for probably the length of a college paper about this.
Oh, you definitely could. You definitely could, because there is so much to dig into. There is really so much to dig into that you could dig into it for days, man. You could pick this apart, and especially when you start getting into what was cut and what they wanted changed, but what actually made the film, which was incredible. There's so much in this. There's also stuff in this film that they wanted cut. It got cut from the screenplay, but they ended up shooting a version of it, which then completely made it through the Century Board. And that actually comes back to, I'm going on a bit of a sidebar here, but someone asked me about this on Twitter recently, so I'm going to just bring it up. But it was the idea of, so Hitchcock done it, right? Hitchcock done it in Psycho. There was a lot of stuff in Psycho that Hitchcock wanted, that the censors wanted changed. And Hitchcock, very famously, there was a day on set where he brought all the cast in, all the crew in, and it was purely a day of which the censors were going to come down to set and they were going to refilm these scenes that they wanted changed. And Hitchcock brought everyone in, and the censors were meant to come in, and when the crew and the cast and that were like, right, should we all get ready? He was like, no, don't do anyone's makeup, don't turn on any lights, don't get any cameras ready. And they said, well, what do you mean? And he said, they're not coming down. And they said, but they are. The censors said, and he said, no, they're not coming down. He says, censors just want to think that you're listening to them. Censors just want to think that someone actually cares about their job. They're not going to change anything. About 9:15, the censors weren't there, and he told everyone to go home, and they got to keep the film as it was. So that's the famous story from Psycho. But James Whale was playing the exact same game back in 1935.
That's something.
Yeah. When you know how to play people, when you know the game, the Hollywood game. But yeah, it's incredible. But let's Dr. Pistorius, man. What did you think of the overall performance? And yeah, how dare, because I knew that was one of the things that really hit you in this, right? That's one of the things that really stuck with you.
It's just I can't even really elaborate enough on how much that dude made me smile and giggle and love what I was watching more and more every time I watched it. Like, it's such disdainful hot camp, and like when he decides to stay behind and just have a snack in the crypt. And
Yeah.
I love how into a beaker he pours himself a shot while offering Frankenstein. He's like, "Would you like some gin? It's my only weakness." And then he's dining in the crypt later on. Would you like a cigar? They're my only weakness. I was like, oh, this guy is amazing.
Yeah,
And
he's so good, man.
I just need to look up more Udo O'Connor. I need to look up more him.
Oh, we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to it in a minute. But the last thing I'll touch on with that role is it is widely considered that James Whale wanted Ernest Festinger to play that role. However, Universal were considering 2 other actors for that role. Now, just imagine this: Claude Rains, Bela Lugosi.
But what the?
What? Yeah, imagine.
Okay, I mean, they would both be very interesting, and of those two, sorry, not sorry, would rather the Claude Rains version.
Oh, hell
but
fucking
no, we're good where we are.
We're good where we are, isn't it? All right, so rounding off the cast with a few of the side players. I told you last week that one of your favourites from The Invisible Man, Udo O'Connor, you were going to see her pop up again. She maybe has as much screen time in this film as anyone else. Again, a real James Whale player, and he really got to bring her into this film and use her to the best of his ability, the best of her ability, really play up that comedic element at the start of the film and then throughout. What did you think, Pam?
You know, where at first in The Invisible Man, I found it a little grating. Just like I said, like The Invisible Man was kind of like a rough first watch for me, just because it was the most theatrical. But where I found her a little grating initially, and that this, I was just like, oh no, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Down to it's been a while since we had a good fire or something along those lines. And like on a nerdy, giggly level, I was like, well, this woman's clothing is awfully clean for someone who just mobbed their way to a fire.
Yeah.
Like, but
I just love the way she turns up everywhere.
everywhere.
She's just in every scene at the beginning of that film, isn't she?
Mm-hmm.
You just no idea how quickly she moves.
She teleport Jason's like our Friday the 13th, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. And on that, kind of another player from The Invisible Man, E. Clive turns up in this. Head policeman in The Invisible Man turns
Oh,
up
that
as
made
the
me so
the
happy.
Verbo
It
Master.
took me about 2 seconds to recognize him.
Yeah,
And I was like, wait a minute, is that? And as soon as he built to the crescendo of,
yeah,
you all should go to your homes, go to sleep.
yeah.
I was like, oh, it's that guy.
Yeah, man, he's so good. He's so good. And the
And can
last
we just
person.
agree that we need to bring back the term Burgermeister?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's such a good term. It's such a good term. It really is. It needs to be brought back. Yeah, it needs to. I'm doing it, man. I'm gonna put it in a film one day, and you're gonna play it, and
I'm
you're gonna
okay with
play it.
this.
That's
I'm okay
where we're
with
going.
this.
That's where we're going with it. And I'm gonna have my makeup guy make you look like E. Clive as well, because you can't do it without that, right? You know, it has.
Okay,
It has to
give
be.
me the E. Clive like brow and nose, but you give me the
Yes,
hair and clothing of the dude who played Renfield, but in this film.
man. So that's rounding out the cast to me. That's rounding out the cast to me. So Dwight Frye is back.
Amazingly.
Completely different character.
I
So
know, right?
oddly
I didn't
enough,
even recognize him at first. At first.
yeah, and then you
Because
do, and then you get into it.
but what was so interesting to me was what I took a note about his character without realizing it was him, because of everything that was going on in the film, which is very prestidigitational. It's been like very look at me. They were like, where is he? And then this dude just leaning on the tree doesn't even like have any reaction other than just kind of point and cock his eyebrow. And
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
bro, that's so natural. That is so natural of a performance.
So
That
oddly,
stood
I was
out.
touching on the cuts, and he actually played a much larger role. So within the film, he still is a serial killer, right?
Oh yeah, this is no life for a murderer.
Yes, yeah. He so in I believe it was like in the middle of the film, as you get to know him, you really get to see him as a serial killer, where he goes and murders his aunt and uncle, and then blames it on the monster. And this was meant to really gauge sympathy for the monster, but this was considered way too graphic, way too much for the day. So yeah, that completely got cut, and that got completely lost on the. A lot of these scenes I'm talking about, by the way, they did get shot. Like I said, there was the
Yeah, no, I
first
read a little
screen
bit
of
of that
this
one, which
film
is why I said that.
was
Yeah.
over 90 minutes long, but as far as I can tell, that's never, that cut is never ever made it to the light of day. And I don't know if that footage maybe exists in the Universal Vault somewhere. I would love to know if it does, but it's never, as far as I know, it's never turned up anywhere. That cut of the film has never been released. But yeah, there was a original 90-minute cut, and that was another scene that they deemed too much and was cut. But yeah, I agree, man. I think Dwight Frye is great in this. I think that he shows off a completely different side of his acting to everything else we've seen him in so far. But yeah, man, he's it's funny. The first time we saw him, you said you hope he pops up again. He's basically popped up in everything, hasn't he? He's so
Yeah.
good. He really, really is.
I just he makes me very happy.
Yeah, I think he's great.
Love to have just like picked this guy's brain for even an hour once, you know.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I completely agree. So the last person I am going to touch on, I'm going to run a cast out with Valerie Hobson, who plays Elizabeth. Now, you may have noticed, you may not, that Elizabeth is a completely different actress in this film. She is now a brunette and not a blonde. we, in our Frankenstein episode, brought up that actually one of the standout performances for us was May Clark as Elizabeth in the first film. Unfortunately, legend has it that May Clark was very ill at the time, so she couldn't return. They did bring in another actress for whatever reason, didn't change her hair colour to make it match. I think once you get over that, it doesn't really matter, if I'm honest. I kind of
Let's
think
be
the
honest, they
performance
don't
still
give the
works.
character much to do.
Yeah, the performance still works. And yeah, Valerie Hobson, I really like her performance in this, man. And she was a very, very new actress. I believe she was only about 17 years old when she starred in this film. She doesn't look 17. She, you know,
No.
like we touched on in the Invisible Man episode, everyone looks far older than what they were. But yeah, what did you think of her performance, and especially taking over from May Clark, who we both very much liked in the original?
I really enjoyed her performance quite a bit, and also, you know, the way the camera treated her. I don't know how else to put it. Like, she reads really well on camera.
Yeah, she does.
Like
Yeah.
that wavy hair, that glassy eye, just that classic Hollywood, you know, dame was just it just oozed off of her. Like,
Yeah,
you
it
could
really did. Yeah. Yeah. I think she really, really works really well with what she's got. Unfortunately, like we keep saying, she doesn't
she
have
just
too
wasn't getting it.
much
Yeah.
to work with.
Well, touching back on Dwight Fry, I was genuinely unsettled by a scene involving him. When Pretorius was trying to talk around like, "Go murder me, one of those disposable women I hear about."
Oh yeah.
And, you know, ladies just walking down the street, and then Dwight Fry's like, "Ah, I'm gonna just strangle you." And I was really kind of like, it made me very, very, very uncomfortable, even though it's not gory in any way,
Yeah.
shape, or
Yeah.
form. Much in the fact, I don't know, did you ever see, man, what was that? Luther, the TV show Luther?
No, I never did watch it. No, but yeah.
There are very few things that have genuinely unsettled me when it comes to like filmed media, and two of them have been television. One of them was an episode of American Horror Story. We can get to some other time, but this episode of Luther, this woman's just walking, and this man is trying to sow chaos throughout a city, and so he's just walking along as well, and then grabs her by the wrist and looks at her, and she looks a little confused and shoots her in the gut, and then walks away.
Right.
And
Okay.
I was just like, holy fucking, what the? No, no, no. I did, like, I was so much more undone by that than almost any filmed, like, gory evisceration thing ever. Because it was subtle, and it was real, and it was fast. It was real.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt about that scene.
I'm with you, man. That is a very, very unsettling scene. I think it actually works. For me, it works very, very well, and it's very unsettling because of the stuff that precedes it, especially the way that Frankenstein is being lied to by Pretorius. He's being completely lied to. He doesn't know where they're getting these body parts from, that they're actually murdering people to get these body parts. He thinks that they're getting them very much in the same way he got them in the
Well,
first
also,
film.
like, just touching on body parts, like, let's touch about the fact that when Pretorius was in the crypt, he just got a skeleton, which is to imply that the bride was built musculature around a skeleton.
Well, also, I don't know if you noticed this on your watches, but he grows certain parts of that body, right? Like the brain is completely grown. The brain isn't taken from any monster. He because that's his thing, isn't it? He can grow. He just can't get scale right. But
Right.
there is a lot. I can't remember exactly what the line is, but it alludes to the fact that he grew the brain. He like this brain was completely grown. It was just the heart and stuff like that he couldn't really master and get his head around. But
Okay.
yeah, I think that's very, very interesting. Again, something that was very complicated for the censors, that they are very much playing God, and very aware of it in this film, you know, and very much against it in the sense of, like, in the first film, Frankenstein is. I think this is a difference, right? In the first film, Frankenstein is trying to play God. That implies there is a God. Frankenstein is just trying to be he or she. But in this film, it's implied more God is fictitious. God isn't real. It's all science, and I'll become that version of God you think exists, right? That's like his whole thing. That's where the whole original fairy tale line come from, and then Bible stories and stuff like that. I think that is far more sinister, and
Mhm.
yeah, quite unsettling in a way. Like when you really buy into the psychotic nature of it. So the last bit from me, dude, that like I have to bring up because on every show we've done so far, I mean all classic horror shows, but especially Universal Monster stuff, I always bring up how much I appreciate you as well, how much we appreciate the score.
Mhm.
I believe that the score composed by Franz Waxman for The Bride of Frankenstein is the greatest Universal Monster score. Very, very possibly the greatest classic horror score you're ever going to hear because it is so grand. It is like most scores that you hear from this era, even all the way up to like the 50s, 60s. They're almost the same thing, right? Like they change. There's little bits about them, but they're almost. Do you know what I mean? They all come from the same piece of music. This is so grand. You've got the opening, the opening scene, the Mary Shelley scene. We keep on about. There's a different score with that. The individual characters all have their own scores. The monster has his own score. Pretorius has his own score. Frankenstein has his own score. The bride has her own score. They each come in at different sections. One of the things I really, really love is what is the bride score. You actually first hear that in the tomb when Pretorius is talking to the monster about the bride and talking about creating a mate. You first hear that score then. That's
Mhm.
when that score first comes in. Then you hear it later on. You're like, oh, okay, that's what it is. Now, the reason why I think that is so important is yes, there was stuff that was along those lines before this, and I could be completely off based on this. I could be completely wrong, but for my money, this is definitely the first time I noticed it. I would even say maybe is the first time this was really done, where a score was given to each individual character, like a really
Okay.
noticeable score was given to each individual
Oh,
character.
absolutely.
Now it might have been done before, but I don't think it was this noticeable. I don't think it was
They
this.
definitely done. It was definitely present in theater, but I don't know about
Yes,
film.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it was never. It never really took off in a way I think it takes off in this film. And the reason why I think that's so important is because that would then become kind of part and parcel with things like Star Wars. Like in Star Wars, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
Luke's theme,
Yeah.
you have Vader's theme, the Imperial March, you have Leia's theme. You know, two more modern films like the Harry Potter films. You have Hedwig's theme, you have Voldemort's theme, you have
Mm-hmm.
I think this can all be traced back to Bride. Now it might not be the first time
I
it done
mean,
it,
even
but it's
like
definitely
a
the most
score I love is
successful.
the Lego Movie. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Yes,
off. Like
no,
a
yeah,
score I
definitely.
truly love
Yeah,
is the Lego Movie, because like I'm a huge Mother's Ball fan, going back to like Rugrats, but when I was a kid and didn't even know what like Devo was, but the fact that like almost every piece of music in that movie is a version of Everything Is Awesome is
yeah,
just
yeah.
awesome to me.
Right, and I think the score for this was incredible. It was
Absolutely.
absolutely incredible. It really
Well, and
was.
the reason I laughed when you brought up the
The Bride.
bride's theme
Yeah,
is because the bit that I teased you with off air is every time I heard that theme, it bears a resemblance in my brain to the theme for I Love Lucy. The
yeah,
crescendo
yeah,
is
yeah,
almost identical,
yeah,
and it to the point where I was about to not bring it up right now,
yeah.
but even as I had it going completely in the background, wasn't looking at the screen in any way, shape, or form, didn't even remember where we were in the film because I was concentrated on the notes that I was looking at, heard that piece of music and went, well, now I have to say it
No, you have
because
to.
I
Yeah,
just heard it.
yeah. The score in this speaks for itself, but Franz Waxman, the composer himself, he worked on some stuff, man. He was.
Okay.
It's funny. He was a composer.
Like I said, I didn't get to do much research, so please
Yeah,
enlighten me.
he was a composer on a lot of stuff, but he was also just part of the sound department on a lot of stuff. So, two films. So, actually, I'll name a couple of films. So, he was the composer on a film called Suspicion, an Alfred Hitchcock film with Cary Grant.
Have not seen it. Am familiar.
Right, great score. He was also he was part of the music department. So, somewhat responsible for the score and the sounds within the film of Rebecca and
Same.
Sunset Boulevard.
Oh, I love Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, man. So, like, this is, again, like, we keep touching on people throughout these films that go on to really, really solidify what a lot of people consider classic Hollywood. And I don't think these people get enough credit. They don't, they're the type of people that you don't really bring up now and again. They're the ones that you don't really think of yet, like we've brought up every show. And this is why I really, really, really wanted to do the Universal Monster stuff, because I feel like it didn't only influence horror. It didn't only take horror to this completely new level. It took Hollywood to a completely new level.
Well, and on a very
genuinely
real
believe-
level, like I actually mean to stomp over you and cut you off right now because like I have thanked you personally, but leave it in. Thank you for finally forcing me down this hole because it's one that I've meant to go down for a very long time and was trying to make happen this year theatrically, and then this year turned into this year.
Yeah.
And I can't think of a better way to have done it than this.
Oh, definitely.
So
man.
thank you.
Definitely. No, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. And you know what? Like, on that note, thank you for joining me on this, because this is a real. I mean, you know me. We've been out for quite a few drinks in LA. And,
Baby.
when I've been over in LA, yeah, and we spent a good few hours just geeking out to films and drinking and talking to
Oh, the
ourselves.
dude's
And
brewery.
yeah, oh man, that was the one, right? We're doing that again. We're doing that again. But
Oh,
yeah, dude, you know how passionate I am about this. You know how geek I am about this, and you like, I think one of the first things you said to me is you meet a lot of filmmakers, but to meet a filmmaker that's so geeky and geeks out as much as I do on this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I've wanted to do this stuff for ages, man, and I couldn't do it unless I had someone to bounce off like you. So yeah, thank you so much, man. You're as important to this as anyone else, and you guys and girls out there listening as well. Thank you for allowing us to make this happen. Like, I said to you, Michael, when I wanted to get this going, if we've got 1 or 2 people that listen every week, it's worth it enough, right? We're going to do it.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, we're lucky enough to have
my own channel.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry.
Exactly.
I mean, don't, but do.
Yeah, definitely do. Definitely gonna check it out. There's some very good stuff on it, including some early interviews with me, which
Yeah.
is always worth a laugh. Yeah, but
But
yeah, definitely go and check out Michael's channel. He's got some good stuff on it. Actually.
And very long, very
Yeah,
long.
different style, but some good stuff on it. Actually, some really good filmmakers that you've highlighted on there, and Michael's got a couple of upcoming filmmakers he's going to highlight on his channel. So definitely check that out, because those filmmakers deserve a spotlight too, without a doubt. Yeah, man. The last thing I'm gonna kind of end this podcast on, for me anyway, is, I think this goes without saying, but this film also essentially ends with one of the greatest lines in cinema history. And I think it's quite funny, because there is a bone of contention with some people about the monster speaking in this film, the monster not speaking in this film. The one thing I will say this film will always have going for it, and the reason the argument that the monster should speak, is because the monster within this film is responsible, in my eyes, for one of the greatest lines in cinema history, one of the greatest deliveries in cinema history, despite Boris Karloff.
It took me a second. Now I'm getting
Yeah?
you. Oh, no, go ahead. Let's see.
Despite Boris Karloff's absolute protest at not wanting the monster to speak, he fully commits and delivers, which I think is the perfect line to end this podcast on. We belong dead. That's it, right? This is it. The delivery, the placement in the film. Oh, so good, man. Dude, thank you so much for joining me. I've really, really enjoyed this episode. I've been wanting to get here for ages. I love Bride. Like I said on top of the show, I think it's the best sequel ever made. Up there with Godfather Part 2 for me.
There it is.
Yeah, this is one we're coming back to, man, because there's so much we need to dive into. There's so much more we can touch on. But yeah, dude, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone out there, for joining me. That's it from me. Anything else from you?
Just everybody take care of yourselves, please. I don't care where you're listening. Let's treat this pandemic like it's real.
Definitely.
And to keep yourself as safe as possible, but also relax as much as you can. And I've talked too much, so take care of yourselves.
And on that, Horror Hounds, stay very safe. Bye.